life, you think of grief as like this solid thing that's like this rock that we kind of needs to be like massaged and dissolved over time, not in the sense of getting rid of it, but in the sense of transforming it. And connection seems to be, in my experience and in the experience of the people I work with, one of the key pieces that supports solution, that supports grief to move and dissolve and transform. And the deepest form of connection, I think, is just human to human.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Love, Loss, and Hallucinations. My guest this week is Albert Strasser. He is a coach with a background in focus and depth work. He helps people, especially men, turn towards the hard stuff, grief, loss, uncertainty, and find meaning, connections, and aliveness on the other side. He does this one-on-one as well as through amazingly named workshops like Good Fucking Grief and Writing with Grief. He blends irreverence and depth, drawing from Buddhist teachings, story work, and lived experience to remind us that being broken open is not a flaw, it is a gateway. And last but not least, he also happens to be the author of a number of children's books, so hopefully we'll have time to get to that as well and see what those are all about. Albert, thank you so much for joining us today. So great to have you here from Bellingham, Washington. And I think I'd like to start with just maybe you could tell the story of how we happen to tangentially know of each other's existence among 8 billion people.
Sure. Yeah. So our connection really begins with my father's death, actually. I mean, yeah, right back to grief, right where I live. And so he passed about 5 years ago, and that's a story unto itself. But about a year later, I signed up to do Vision Quest, which is a 4-day wilderness solo fasting, just water. And I did it through a program called Animus Valley. And on that program, I met a woman named Tiffany DeBartolo. Is that how you say your wife's last name?
DeBartolo. Or if you're Italian, DeBartolo.
DeBartolo. So I met your wife and we connected, and then through her got connected to you. And I remember she sent me your children's book. She sent me a copy of your children's book in the mail.
That's right. Henry's Big Star Adventure, I think.
Yeah. Such a great story.
My one and only. Oh, thank you. Well, and I think, just dive in a little bit on the Vision Quest, maybe, because I feel like a lot of people probably don't know what that is. Like, what does that entail? What pulled you to go and endure that, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a big story. So a Vision Quest, I mean, there's lots of ways of doing it, but the way Animus structures it is a 10-day program with about 4 days of prep. And then you do a 4-day wilderness solo, and then a couple days of integration. So the wilderness solo is really the meat of it. And during that, you go and find a place. In this case, I was in the Arizona desert to be really, really alone. And you sit and basically be with and relate to the natural world for 4 days. You have water and, in this case, camping supplies, so like tent and sleeping bag and sleeping pad. And that's it. And I was drawn to it because, it had been about 12 months since my dad's death, and I was feeling really broken, to put it simply, to put it kind of bluntly. And I knew that I needed something to relate to that brokenness in a new way. I needed something to kind of crack me open to be in a relationship with life without my dad in a new way. So I sought it out for that, and it ended up being just the beginning. I think on the 3rd day of prep before going into the solo, we were out at a wilderness base camp, and somehow a call got through to me, and I was told that my brother, one of my 3 brothers, was in the hospital in critical condition, the brain injury. And so I really view that Vision Quest. I didn't end up getting to do the wilderness solo during the 4-day quest that time. I went back about a year later to do it and finish it, but it ended up being a much longer quest for me.
Yeah, at least a year, multiple years, I believe, because I know your brother is still dealing with this brain injury that happened
Hmm.
during that quest. I mean, yeah, talk about a quest, because here you are there. And I have actually also done a vision quest
Oh, right.
back in the day. So same group, Animus. So I do have some familiarity with it. And even those first 3 days, like you are already breaking open, you're already getting raw, and like your heart is just like expanding, and all what I sounds like for you, grief is rising. And then you get this call from about your brother. And
Mhm.
I mean, can you even convey how that hit?
Yeah. I mean, so initially it was quite confusing because I was told he had had a seizure and was in an induced coma, which, and the math of that didn't really make sense because I have another brother who has a seizure disorder and has grand mal seizure. So I know what seizures are like, and I know the impact they have. And I was like, how could it be in a coma if he had a seizure? Like that doesn't, like, it's not a good sign that he had a seizure. But um, it turns out he was in Austria at the time, and it turns out there had been a kind of language barrier. So
Mm,
he'd gone into cardiac arrest. He'd been dead for, I think, like 12, 13 minutes, been
wow. Oh my
resuscitated, and
gosh.
then was put into an induced coma as a life-saving kind of move by the medical team. So the information was coming in slowly, and part of the way it hit was just a lot of uncertainty. Like I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I should fly to Austria to see him. I didn't know if yeah, I didn't know the severity of the situation just yet.
Hmm.
Once the severity of this, when my family got to Austria and told me what was actually happening, and that was, I mean, I remember it so vividly. It was a complete, almost like out of body,
Mm,
deeply cathartic, out of control kind of grief.
wow.
And to be honest, like way more so, my dad's death was also unexpected and hit that kind of primal, visceral response. But this was like way, way, way more.
Wow. Wow. And um, yeah, I mean, how did that evolve for you over the next year, as you're, I believe, trying to care for him and trying to find the best path, and still try, I assume, I would imagine, trying to take care of yourself in some way and find
Mhm.
an outlet for all of these feelings that you're having.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's part of what has led me to doing the work that I do now.
Mm,
Is it just was so all encompassing. And he was in critical condition for about 6 months in ice. Well, he was in ICUs for 4 months, and then a kind of specialized brain rehabilitation hospital for another 4 months after that. And then he was transitioned into home care. And the, I guess how I'd put it is it brought me so far beyond the edge of what I thought possible, that I
mm,
thought my body, mind, psyche, heart could tolerate repeatedly. And, I just care for my brother so much that there was such a willingness and desire to keep digging and find the energy to try to, save him in some way, quote
mm-hmm.
unquote. And I think the pain point, but also the opportunity point, and why this idea of broken open is so important to me is he didn't get better.
Mm,
I've never tried so hard to do anything. I've never given so much of myself to
mm,
an endeavor, and there was basically zero result. The only significant growth was that he went from being like hovering on the edge of life and death from day to day to stabilized comatose,
wow.
which is not, you know, it's not something you really celebrate. You're not like, yay, he's,
Yeah.
medically stable in a coma. And being with that level of uncertainty and kind of helplessness in such an enduring way made me really, really have to look at, like, wow, what do we do with grief? What do we do
Mm,
with these sorts of situations as humans when we can't change them? We can't mitigate or alter because, the human mind and body and spirit, we're so programmed to want to solve the problem, to
yeah.
find some way to find some solid ground we can rest on and pin it in the wall and have it be either done or not done. And death and loss and grief, and especially these sorts of ambiguous experiences of loss, really challenge that in the mind and really force you to think about and look at being human in a new way.
Mm. And so, yeah, having gone down this path and still living it, I believe he's still in a coma. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And coma is normally when people think of coma, this is how I thought of coma, at least. I imagined a person lying on their back, eyes shut, basically asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I've since learned there are many forms of coma. And so the kind of state he's in, just to give people kind of a visual, is I hate the term vegetative state. It's so diminutive, but that he has sleep and wake cycles. We put him in a wheelchair during the day. He doesn't seem to have any agency over movement. He doesn't eat on his own. We feed him through a tube into his belly. He does breathe on his own. He was on a ventilator for many months, but he regained the capacity to breathe on his own, which was really fortunate. But that's kind of the state he's in at present.
Wow. I mean, what a journey. And so what have you brought forth from that as far as grief, and how does that inform the workshops you do and the one-on-one work you do with people?
Yeah. I mean, what I always come back to as the center point of my work and what I think is important in grief is connection. Or as a broader concept, I call it solution. Solution meaning the water in which the crystal dissolves. And so if you think of grief as like this solid thing that's like this rock that we kind of needs to be like massaged and dissolved over time, not in the sense of getting rid of it, but in the sense of transforming it. And connection seems to be, in my experience and the experience of the people I work with, one of the key pieces that supports solution, that supports grief to move and dissolve and transform. And the deepest form of connection, I think, is just human to human, creating spaces where we can very simply just be together and talk about and relate to and tell the story of loss and grief is magically powerful. I mean, in the cohorts I lead, especially writing with grief, where I have the chance to work with people over a number of weeks, and they get the chance to build safety and rapport with each other over a number of weeks. In a certain way, it's not anything particularly magical. It's not like I'm teaching some secret ingredient to like how to grieve well, but there's just a container that creates enough safety and solution that grief naturally starts to move and transform. I think solution can also exist in connection to nature. A lot of people, myself included. Yeah. So spending time with nature, in connection with nature, can be so healing, so healing. And then I think the other piece is just an orientation. I mean, I have a long background with Tibetan Buddhism, and so much of Tibetan Buddhism is oriented to...
Yes, you trained as a monk for a year or so?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah.
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah. Sometimes I stretch it to sound cool. No, it's 6 months. Yeah. Yeah. So I trained as a monastic for 6 months, and for about 10 years was a very dedicated practitioner in a Tibetan Buddhist lineage. And so much of the orientation in Tibetan Buddhism is about turning towards and trusting that even the most difficult emotional experiences are actually wise and good at their core. And in the same way, grief has so much wisdom in it and so much beauty in it, and it's scary as fuck. So creating context or opportunities for people to turn towards, and for myself, I'm also speaking for myself here, to turn towards grief and relate to it directly and intimately, I think is so important, particularly in a cultural context in which grief is kind of taboo.
Yeah.
We don't like to talk about it. It scares the shit out of us.
Yep.
Understandably.
Like to just pass right over it, ignore it, don't know what to say, people super uncomfortable, all the things. Definitely. Yeah. Was there a moment like where you realized it was like this connection to other people or nature, but specifically people? Was there a moment for you where you were like, oh my gosh, this is what we need more of, and this is what people need to like facilitate to help each other?
Yeah, I think it was a collection of small moments that gradually led me to that conclusion, or that at least working hypothesis. Interestingly, though, one moment that stands out, which is a little bit tangential, is I read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is a popular book right now. And in it, there's a small section where he talks about proximity, like where if you are, like, say you want to start running more, if you hang out with people who run more, you'll naturally start running more. And I remember that just hitting me like, whoa, that's like the hack of hacks for habit formation. Like you just spend time with people who are doing the thing you want to do or have things that yeah.
What a great idea.
Yeah. And so there was something about that really made me start to think about how much we are impacted by connection as humans and relationship as humans. And then if we bring that into the grief space, there's something about, being in proximity with people who really, really get it, who also want to turn towards because they're having their own experience of it. And, I think I know for me, until I had my own direct relationship with deep loss, I didn't get it. I could kind of empathize, like theoretically.
Right.
But I remember when I was in my early 20s, this woman told me she'd lost her brother, and I totally froze. And I was like, sounds rough. Like that was my response. I didn't know what to say.
Ouch. Yeah. But yeah, especially, most people don't. And, us young, well, I'm not young now, but back in the day, I would have been the same. I probably would have said the same thing, like, oh, sorry. You just don't know. And I'm curious. I was just watching Bono from U2 has this his one-man shows on, I think, Max right now. It's called Surrender. And he at one point he says this quote about when you lose someone, they bequeath you a gift. And so he lost his mother when he was young, which drove him to sing. He lost his father normal age, and that actually helped improve his voice, he said. So I'm wondering, with your father and I guess the way your brother once was, like, what gifts have perhaps been bequeathed to you?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to turn to this phrase, broken open. I think it's interesting because with my dad's death, as much as that broke me, so to speak, I was also fighting so hard to be okay. And I think this is so common in grief. We fight. We want to be okay. We want to bounce back. We want to return to life the way it was before the loss, which is so human and so natural. And it doesn't really work. I remember efforting so hard. And, I'm strong-willed. I have a background. I love personal development and biohacking and all these things. And so I was trying so hard to be okay. And, the blessing and curse, but the blessing of my brother's injury, Oliver's injury, is that it created a context that was too big for my strategies. It was too big for the hacks and the personal development kind of orientation. And that was kind of the real fracture. That was the path to really having to be in relationship to, like, okay, this is broken. This is also open. And so the gift, and it's, an ever evolving gift, and I'm very much still in relationship with it. I won't for a moment pretend to be like, oh, I'm done now. I figured it out. But I have found, and I don't even think about this a lot anymore, but pre those experiences, I wasn't as easily touched by life. Tears didn't come to my eyes as easily. I didn't see as much beauty in life. And since going through those things, there's a way that I just feel really, really deeply touched by life a lot. Tears come to my eyes really easily. And it's not always, it can sound kind of romantic of like, oh, I'm so touched by life. And it's not always comfortable. In the same vein, like I just feel like a deeper sensitivity. And sometimes that sensitivity exists as anxiety. Sometimes it exists as a feeling of anguish.
Yeah.
And I think more and more I value that sensitivity and see it as something meaningful.
Well, and I would venture to say, like, it also reminds you how alive you are right now.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like, both in our culture in general and men in particular, like they have difficulty with that sort of allowing themselves to break open. And so obviously it sounds like in your workshops and one-on-one, like that's kind of what you're striving for, I would imagine. I'm not really sure if there's a question there, just more of an observation.
Yeah. I mean, really, I think, one of the concepts we talk about in my workshops is recovery versus integration. And there can be an instinct toward wanting to recover from grief, which is so normal and so human, and not really how it works.
Yeah.
It's
Grief has no timeline.
Grief has no timeline and no endpoint, really.
Right.
And so it's more of, how do we learn to carry this? I often use the metaphor of a sharp stone. Like, you lose that person, and then you're gifted this stone that it has sharp edges, and you hold it in your hand and it cuts your hand because it's so sharp. But the more you handle it and the more you pass it around and let others handle it, the softer the edges become, and you don't get rid of the stone. The stone is always going to be with you, but it becomes familiar and it becomes soft edged, and in a way it becomes a friend. But it takes time and handling.
Yeah. Careful handling, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you, in the work you've done, is there any particular difference per se between men versus women as they go through this in general? I mean, obviously everyone's different, but just curious about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's all the kind of stereotypical stuff, and it is very individualistic. Some men have an easy time relating to the vulnerability of grief and loss and tears and anguish, but a lot of men don't. For a lot of men, it's on some level culturally conditioned to stay strong. Or something I see commonly with men is, if there is a kind of cathartic release or a moment of vulnerability, there's an impulse to pull it together quickly. There's kind of sense of how long is appropriate to cry, for example.
Right.
And so, some women have that too. But it seems that women have an easier time. If anything, I think sometimes women feel like they're crying too much, and that is inappropriate, and they kind of want to hold back for a different reason.
And if from both your own experience and from witnessing with others and the work you do, like, what is on the other side for people who allow themselves to just really lay down in the grief and just let it overcome them?
Yeah. Like, what does integration look like, feel like, taste like, smell like?
Yeah.
I mean, it's nuanced and it's personal, but I think the couple things I could say. One is that there can be a tendency to, there's something where we like to assume, or we tend to assume, that how we're feeling right now is how we're always going to feel. And in grief, that's a really tough one, because we feel like shit. We feel completely overwhelmed, weighed down, destroyed. And it does change. There is a way that it becomes, the way I describe it is, it's not that the grief goes away, but we become, or not even that the grief gets smaller, but we become larger. We become wide enough to hold it in a different way. And part of it's a somatic and embodied experience. The way that kind of feels or can be experienced is, people describe it as, like, I'm thinking of one client who talks about his experience. Like, he'll wake up in the morning with the same ruminating thoughts, sometimes the same experience in his body of fear or anxiety or regret or remorse, but it doesn't dominate his everything anymore. There's more space to hold it, and he's able to kind of even bring some humor to it. I think, like, the titling of my workshop, Good Fucking Grief, for example, like, there's something even a little bit irreverent that starts to happen, where there's a lightness that we discover in the dark. And this has been my direct experience as well. There's a kind of like very dark humor that starts to emerge, a kind of levity that starts to emerge amongst the heaviness. And in many ways, I actually have pondered and thought that the best comedy, I think, is probably usually born from that place of depth.
Definitely, from pain and grief and loss and all those things. I know from just my own personal experience, like when I was back on the Vision Quest and then ended up going to India and ayahuasca and all that sort of thing, it was because it was this grief and loss around Tiffany and I separating and almost getting a divorce. But from that has since come the children's book we mentioned earlier, and a memoir. And I think just being just more empathetic to those around me who have, whatever that loss may be, because it can be
Hmm.
so many different levels. It doesn't have to be losing a person.
Hmm. And I love that you're speaking to the empathy piece, because that's an important aspect. I think what I've witnessed and experienced myself is, as personal loss is integrated, it connects into the fabric of collective loss and collective grief, which is heavy.
Mm,
It's heavy to hold,
yeah.
but there's again this quality of just contact. There's a quality of really seeing and meeting reality, and it can evoke such deep empathy and care for our fellow human beings, who all of whom have these complex, sometimes deeply painful stories.
Yeah. And so much of the time it's just listening to the person's story. Like, that's all they
Hmm.
need. You don't need to say something perfect, because you probably won't.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I do want to touch on one thing that sort of with your brother's Oliver, right?
Hmm.
His story is that his brain injury happened while he was in an ibogaine ceremony, correct?
Hmm.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, ibogaine is sort of like, it's a plant medicine, psychedelic, but whereas something like mushrooms might last 4 to 6 hours, LSD might last 12 hours, ibogaine can last for days. And I think I want to bring that up because most of the people I have on here are plant medicine advocates and the healing power of plant medicine, which it certainly has. But I feel like it's important to point out here that there are dangers, and
Hmm.
you doing these medicines, well, any of them, it's important to have it in a good setting with people who know what they're doing, and where there isn't a language barrier, I would say, it sounds like. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but just wanted to put that into this conversation.
Yeah, it's super important. Thanks for bringing it in. I mean, similarly, I'm a big advocate. I am very supportive of the use of plant medicine and entheogens. I've worked with them myself, and yeah, just so much caution is necessary, both psychologically and in the case of iboga, physiologically. And ibogaine is from what I understand, the synthetic extract of
Hmm.
iboga.
Right.
And iboga or ibogaine it's to my knowledge one of the only classic entheogens that can kill you. It impacts the heart in a particular way, and if you take too much of it, you can overdose. And I had heard about iboga and ibogaine in the years prior to my brother's injury, and it seems to be gaining some popularity. And I know the research on supporting it being useful to support people with addiction is really robust and
Yeah, and
promising.
PTSD, both of those
Hmm.
very promising.
Okay. Yeah. And I have talked to a number of people who have done it completely without knowing that it can kill you.
Wow.
And so if you have pre-existing heart conditions, it's probably something to avoid or be extremely cautious about.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I just find it amazing. Like, Texas, of all places, right now, they just approved $50 million, which is to study ibogaine or iboga, and particularly around PTSD and military and that sort of thing. So I know it can be effective, but yeah, just a strong word of caution, particularly around that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 Um, and so I'm kind of curious, like, looping back to where we started with, you did finally get to do a vision quest a year later.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like, if you don't mind sharing whatever you feel like sharing from it, um, after going through all this with your dad and your brother?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it felt really important somehow to go back and finish, so to speak, to go back into the desert and be alone. And I mean, to be honest, it was rough. It was really rough. I had a hard time. I
Mm-hmm.
was I was very hungry. some some people seem to have a easier time with the fasting for 4 days, and I was just ravenous for
Oh,
4 days. I
wow.
never kind of like hit that ketosis point where you kind of get the clarity and don't feel so hungry. So I was just hungry. And the desert, I went back to the Arizona desert and did it there. And
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on an island in the Pacific Northwest, and the lush ocean mountain landscape is very much the landscape of my soul. The desert feels like the moon to
Oh,
me.
wow.
It
So
feels so
extra
foreign.
edge.
Yeah. And so I remember being out there, and everything spikes you. Like everything has spikes and
Everything
bites
wants
you.
to
And
hurt you.
oh my, that's how it felt. And I just, you know, the part of what I took away from it and learned from it was kind of mirroring my internal experience. Life, that's how life felt.
Mm,
Felt like everything was trying to hurt me. And there was something powerful about having that so intimately reflected in my external environment. And there was a moment, I kind of was like waiting for the vision, waiting for the moment of epiphany. And to be honest, it didn't really come.
mm.
There was something about just being in for 4 long days in contact with this direct experience of discomfort that was in like unto itself meaningful. But there was this glimpse. I remember falling asleep on the last night, and I rolled over in my sleeping bag, and the moon was shining, and it was an experience of the moon kind of winking at me.
Mm.
Like, give me a little, kind of almost cheeky, almost a little irreverent. And it was just the briefest glimpse of, wow, even when everything in my life feels like absolutely fucked, even when I'm hungry and everything is poking at me and I can't sleep and I just kind of on some level want to disappear.
Mm.
There's this moment, this glimpse of magic, this glimpse of humor, this glimpse of something beyond. And I really hung on to that because it was and continues to be. I mean, there have been many waves since then of life feeling just fucking hard, just
Mm.
so goddamn hard. And I think that's true for most of us.
Yeah.
It's like life is being a human is damn, like it's a thing.
It's the thing. It's not a walk in the park.
It's not goddamn. And so trying to stay connected to it's like this kind of like widening of awareness where there's this level of okayness that is beyond things being okay, because things aren't okay. Like, let's be honest. Like,
Mhm.
maybe some of us are in moments, seasons of life where things are really flowing. But like, you look at the news, it's like things aren't okay. And so learning to be in relationship with the reality that things are pretty fucked.
Things are pretty fucked and messy.
Yeah. And not from a nihilistic lens, but from a lens of like, this is what it, this is what it means to be human.
Mhm.
And we have to learn to be in relationship with it.
Yeah, the messiness of being human and
Mhm.
in this world. I really liked also what you said about, nature reflecting where you were in that moment. And I just from my own experience, obviously I've done a vision quest and I've done other outdoor sort of work, personal work. Just the power of nature to like really tap into where you're at in
Mhm.
a beautiful way that um, I don't know. I think a lot of people gloss over right now. And I'm just wondering, do you use that in your grief work at all?
You know, my grief work has all been online so far.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm doing my first in-person retreat in September, dates to be determined, but it'll be in British Columbia, and it will definitely integrate nature and connection to nature as part of it. The way I integrate it into my online work is I encourage people to spend time in nature
Mm.
as part of their process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's great.
because I agree, it's so valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I'm curious in all your in the grief work you've done and just life in general, like um what is it what have you learned about love?
That's a great question. I mean, what's top of mind right now, I'm actually this is quite personal, but I'm going through a breakup right now.
Mm,
And so, which is another type of grief, it's another type of
absolutely.
loss. And I think there's something about relating to, again, I come back to this term broken open. I know have at times leaned too far or gotten stuck in the broken part, where I'm like, I'm broken. I've gone through these hard things. I've gone through this trauma. I've seen I've seen things I wish I could unsee, and all of which is true, you know? And I think this is so for many of us. We've gone through things that on a certain level are just unspeakable, unthinkable, that no one else can really ever understand.
Right.
And there's something about recognizing that we are fundamentally, you know, as much as connection is integral and so important to the process of healing, fundamentally, it's our journey, and we're kind of ultimately responsible for doing the work to be able to show up in a good way to life, to relationship, to work, to our family. And that's a big ask. And I've definitely found myself at times being caught in a kind of story, a narrative of like, help me. Like, I need help. I'm broken, you know, I've been through this tough thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so to bring it back to your question, what have I learned about love? I mean, grief can be an access point into deeper love. But it can also, I think sometimes, and I'm just speaking from my direct experience right now, it can be an excuse to not love fully, an excuse to show up to love in a way that is low integrity or not solid. So that's one piece. The other answer I'll give to that question is that grief exists because we love.
Yes.
We can't grieve what we don't love. And so even though grief can feel horrible, I would imagine, but I know this is true for me and many of my clients, there is something that feels really sweet about it. To scream the love of this person or place or thing that we've lost. Because it's like, what is the phrase? It's the other side of the same coin.
Right.
It's like literally just love on the other side. And I've often heard grief described as love with nowhere to go. And I think about that a lot, and I'm like, I'm not sure I don't know if I feel it that way. You know, I get that it's like love that you normally directed to this person in a physical body. But from my view, it's like grief is love, and it knows exactly where to go, and it's still going there. And that's part of why it hurts so much.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's, I mean, just seeing it as sort of this beautiful expression in the deepest way of love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Excuse me?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. I am curious though, in the first part of that, when you were saying it's an excuse perhaps not to show up, like, and not to be authentic, I think that's what you said. Could you expand a little bit more on that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, this is getting pretty personal, but basically, I have found myself at times, again, relating to the challenging experiences of my life as a kind of excuse or reason to show up to life, show up to relationship, show up to work, kind of half-heartedly, kind of like you can't expect more from me because I went through all this hard stuff.
Right.
And I'm learning that that's not great, and it's not getting, it doesn't get me the results I want, and it doesn't feel good for people I'm in relationship with or work I'm in relationship with. There's it's again, this kind of radical personal responsibility. And it's not I'm cautious here because I'm not pointing to, you need to go fix this by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's not at all what I'm trying to say. But there is a sense of like, it's not your fault what happened. It's not your fault. The physiological, psychological, spiritual response, like grief is normal and natural. It is your responsibility to find the pathway to healing so that you can meet your partner, so that you can meet your work, so that you can meet your kids and your life in a good way. And I'm saying this to myself because I've not always done that.
Well, yeah, nothing like personal experience. And I love the phrase, showing up in a good way across all those fields, like just having that be the goal and whatever that looks like. Um, Definitely. Thank you for sharing that when it was very, despite it being personal.
Yeah, of course.
um, Switching tracks a little bit here. I'm wondering how your children's book. I mean, you have a number of them, like 6 or 7. Is that correct? That are out in the world. The
Yeah, something
various
like that.
things. How do they weave into this work, or is it something completely different, or exploring different aspects of like Buddhism or anything else like that? It's really fascinating.
Yeah, the way the way they weave into the work is not direct. I think there's something that I think is valuable and that I try to do is turn what is happening in my life into art in some way.
Mm,
There's this great teacher, if you haven't checked her out, Madeline Moon talks a lot about this really skillfully, and she has a podcast as well. But there's something about transmuting the energy of whatever is coming up in life into art that I think is deeply, deeply valuable.
mm.
So my kids' books basically are a collection of the things that I'm chewing on in life. They represent, the moment of whatever I'm kind of sifting through and working on. And my debut children's book is called Afraid of the Light. And at the time, it was when I was in my monastic training and I was studying a Buddhist text called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. That's the English translation, which is a complex and multifaceted text.
I've read that
And
once, and you're right. It is complex and multifaceted, and
yeah,
most of it was just like, what?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not very straightforward. I was very fortunate I was living at the monastery Gampo Abbey, which is Pema Chodron's monastery,
Mm.
and she was there teaching at the time. And she was teaching on that text,
Oh,
and she
wow.
is so skilled at bringing these kind of big, complex Buddhist concepts and making them very human, very mundane, very kitchen sink, as she says. And so I was kind of reading the text and learning from her, and then working on this book and figuring out like how can I make this accessible and contextualize it for children. And so it's about this rabbit who lives in a dark cave and is afraid of the light.
Mm.
And the kind of general theme is recognizing that as humans, we are really afraid of what is unfamiliar. Even if the familiar world we're in is really inconvenient and really painful, we'll often choose that over the possibility of a much brighter, beautifuler, magicaler world.
Right.
And I was tracking that in myself at the time too, like, wow, I'm so hooked on these familiar patterns of behavior and ways of being in life and being in my body and being in my Albert that are limiting. And so,
Mm.
as this story progresses, the rabbit, Ditter von Dapp is his name, loses a shoe and has to go on this adventure and eventually encounter the light in order to find it, which is also seems to be how it works. We stumble through life, and life generously provides us these often seemingly inconvenient experiences
Mhm.
that kind of wake us up and give us the opportunity to relate to the world in a new way if we let it.
If we choose
And
to. Yeah.
if we choose to. And this is kind of circling back again to, with grief and loss, there can be such an instinct to like, I want to go back. I want to go back to how it was. I want to go back to how I was. And it's not really an option. The invitation in grief is transformation, is
Mm.
metamorphosis. But, metamorphosis involves dissolving into a pile of cosmic sludge inside of a dark cocoon. It's scary shit. It's a
Scary as
romantic.
shit. Yes.
Yeah, it's like a fun idea, but like, and the caterpillar doesn't know that they're going to grow wings.
Yeah.
They don't know what the fuck's going to happen.
No. No.
So it's yeah, it's scary. And so the children's book kind of follows that theme. And then the ones since have been, they've been on all sorts of topics. There's one called Your Thought Thinking Thinker. That's kind of an exploration of mind and what is the mind and what are thoughts and how do we relate to thoughts. There's one called Mr. Kerplas has lost his glasses. That is about how often the thing that we're looking for is on top of our head.
Right. Imagine
Spoiler
that.
alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Well, I love that you're taking these concepts and like putting it in a context that, children can grasp it, learn it, see a new way of being, know that they're not alone, and being afraid of the light or the dark for that matter. Yeah, that's beautiful. Do you have any current ones in the works that you can tell us about, or thoughts around one?
I'm not currently working on any. I just wrote my most recent one was about, actually my most recent two. There was one called The Bee Who Got Stuck. And I came up with it because I was lying in this big, what is it called? Like a geodome. And there's a window at the top and all these bees had flown in and they were trying to get out
to the
through
light.
They were going to the light. And I was like, oh God, you guys got it. Like there were all these windows at the bottom that were open. I was like, you guys got to go fly down. And I was like, wow, humans, I do this all the time. I'm just like, keep trying the same thing. I'm like trying to go up. It's not working, but I keep trying.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this story of a bee who gets stuck trying to go up and eventually realizes actually sometimes you need to go down, which is again connected to grief work.
Yeah.
Because grief work is descent work. It's really going into the shadow.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect segue actually, because I meant to ask you this earlier, so I'm glad it came around. But for like those people out there who don't know, like, what is depth work? How would you define that? What's the value in it?
That's a great question. The way I think of depth work is, again, fundamentally, it's about turning towards. It's about being in relationship, learning to be in deeper relationship with reality as it is, in contrast to a kind of personal development orientation that is inclined to try to kind of rise above reality or rise above the human experience, which can, in my view and in my experience, garner short-term results, but doesn't really have the longer lasting fulfillment that we're searching for. The depth work is about, being in relationship to reality and turning towards the whole range of what it means to be human.
The messiness of human, as we were talking earlier. I mean, I definitely, again, from personal experience, like fully agree the value and the worth of going down and the depth. And I feel so much of a lot of religions and culture in general is always about going up into the light. It's all, you're trying to rise above and all that stuff. And you're missing like such a valuable, juicy half of it, even though, as we have discussed, it can be painful and just horrible sometimes, but
absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's something here about either direction can be kind of fetishized, like the depth or shadow work. And I'm speaking again for myself, but I've encountered this in others as well, where there can be kind of, in the rejection of the ascent, there can be kind of an obsession with descent and with dark shadow work. And I think this again links to what I was sharing earlier about not letting yourself get stuck in the catharsis, stuck in the grief. Like there is a value to descent, but there's a point at which it's no longer valuable to keep digging.
Yes.
Where actually you need like motion. You need to get out of the hole and continue with your life. And doing that again requires so much support and connection and solution to do it well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where, ego often gets a bad name, but that's where ego like comes back into play and bringing whatever little juicy bits you got down there in that depth work to like bring it back to the world and put it to good use, hopefully.
Absolutely.
So as I was researching, talking to you, on your website, you have a quote that you say lives at the heart of what you offer by Howard Thurman. Thurman, yes, Thurman. And the quote is, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." For those of you for those of you who can't see him, he's got this big smile on his face. And I'm just curious, like, why do you feel that's at the heart of what you do?
There's an adjacent quote that I don't know verbatim, but it's something to the effect of, don't try to be good, try to be happy, because happy
Mm.
people will do good. Something like that. I'm
Mhm.
butchering it, but there's something about aliveness and orienting to, so many of us, we want to be good humans. We want to do good in the world. We want to contribute positively to the world, which is beautiful. That's me too. And it can be deadening.
Mm.
It can put us to sleep, because if we're not in relationship with our unique, beautiful fingerprint of expression, if we're kind of mimicking or trying to fit ourselves into the mold of what we think we're
Mm.
supposed to be. And this can
Mhm.
exist in so many contexts. I mean, like traditionally or like stereotypically, it's, people choosing a full career path that isn't really aligned with what they want because of their parents or culture or whatever. But I think it can exist in microcosmic ways as well. Like, even in like social media creation, there's so much orientation to like what will get clicks, what will sell, what will grab the viewer's attention.
Right.
And as an entrepreneur, that's part of the equation. You can't ignore that. But there's something so important about really asking yourself and really connecting to what makes you come alive.
Mm.
And it's a journey that I'm still very much on too. It's not like I've kind of like found it and like, oh, this is it. But I think it's a North Star for me.
Yeah.
And it's
Finding
something that I
that
bring.
that authentic self
Yeah.
that's just in there and waiting to be expressed.
Mhm.
Um, and I love that you brought social media in, because I will say your Instagram is quite entertaining at times. Um, and I know from just listening to some other podcasts that you do have some background in sacred clowning. Is that right? And
Mhm.
what is that? How does that all show up in this?
People hear sacred clowning and they're like, what the fuck? They're like, the first image that flashes into most people's minds is like this very creepy birthday clown.
Yeah, right. Of course.
So I'm often actually hesitant to even like use the word clown when I'm marketing this, but it's sacred clowning, or the work that I've done with it is really about gaining access to or remembering how to access full range of expression through the
Mm,
body and the
interesting.
voice.
Can you give an
And
example of that?
yeah, so like a classic exercise that we would do is called switch. And so if I was kind of on stage and you were my switcher, I go up and I take on a character. So maybe it's like, I don't know, I do this voice and I've got this weird kind of, and then anytime you want, you say switch and I have to immediately jump into a different character. And what tends to happen after 5, 10, 15 switches, especially for new people, for new clowns, there's a tendency they'll start with familiar patterns of body movement and voice, and then you switch them enough and they kind of short circuit and something entirely new comes out and they're surprised by it, I'm surprised by it, and it's so fun and refreshing, and it can be
Mm,
usually funny, but it can also be deeply touching. And it's really an orientation to like, how can we remember how to express the full range? And in like, it's something I plan to bring into in-person grief work,
mm,
not in the sense of like, haha, this is so funny, but in the sense of let's open the body and the voice to the full range so that we're not kind of having to exist in this narrow range of an expression. And I think this is important, especially for men, because
mm,
men are so prone to have this very narrow expressive range where we're kind of only allowed to be a little bit silly or a little bit sad. And then the rest of the time, there's kind of this stoic, I'm okay, whatever. And inviting men and humans in general into this kind of wide, wilder expression. And when I've facilitated it with men, it's so cool to experience how terrifying it is, how edgy it is. But then afterwards, this quality of aliveness, this
mm.
sense of like, holy shit, that was so fun.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, the just, it sounds like this exhilarating sense of discovery of
Mhm.
your own self, really. Yeah, it makes me, I want to sign up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredibly fun. I could do it for hours and hours, but I think the deeper power to me, I mean, some people study it and practice it for performance, which
Mhm,
is awesome. But the power of it to me is really about developing range and developing full expression and
mhm.
gaining access.
Well, I mean, that's such valuable work, both for all humans, but as you mentioned, particularly men. We definitely get the boot on the throat. It's
Mhm.
usually our own boot, but
Mhm. Totally.
society usually doesn't help that either.
Yeah.
Um, well, Albert, this has been amazing. What a wonderful conversation. Definitely, where can people find you? Where can they find about your seminars and workshops? I mean,
Yeah. My Instagram is just my full name, Albert Strasser. That's my handle. And albertstrasser.com is my website. Those are the two places to start. And you can join my email list from both those places to be in touch and to learn about upcoming dates for workshops and cohorts.
perfect. And I definitely encourage people to follow him on Instagram. It is worth the follow. And all their books are available on Amazon and all those
Yeah.
good places as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Thanks so much, Albert. Look forward to talking again in the future. And it's been a really enlivening and insightful show today. If it resonated with you out there in the listening world, definitely like it, follow, share it, all those things that you need to do to help keep this thing alive. So appreciate it. Thanks again, Albert.
Thanks, Scott. It's been great being here with you.